Welcome to RSBN Live for some breaking coverage of Attorney General Pam Bondi and her Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche holding a press conference. And if my Florida political history is correct, Mr. Director might be able to help me with this one here. Todd Blanche is a former Democrat, as is Pam Bondi. But going back to the 2010 election, I believe Mr. Blanche actually attempted to become the Democrat nominee for Attorney General and would have gone up against AG Pam Bondi way back when. But although they were in different political parties, worked so well together and made Florida safe again, now he is a deputy at the highest level. So a little bit interesting history and insight with that background, if I am 100% correct there, which I normally am. But we'll see what happens there. Regardless, a big press conference today with the AG, Pam Bondi, and Deputy Todd Blanche. We hope you're having a wonderful Friday on this June 6th in America. This is scheduled for 3:45, so 3:45 Eastern Daylight Time for you and the nation's capital, as President Trump is heading to Bedminster for the weekend. And this June 6th, as we covered earlier today, a beautiful 81st anniversary of the D-Day invasion of those wonderful men who, against all odds, took on the Nazi regime and changed the tide of the American front in Western Europe and throughout the world. It began a wave that did end up saving the world against extremism, whether it came from the German army or the Italian front, as well as the Imperial Japan. They are the bravest that were among us, truly the greatest generation. So if you have that chance to shake the hand of one, to discuss with one about their experiences, just amazing people, and not many of them who are with us any longer. Think about being in your late teens, many actually falsifying their age in order to serve. So you really did have even 15 and 16-year-olds potentially on those battlefields, as well as young people in their 20s who truly lost 2 lives on those beaches of Normandy while storming Omaha Beach, as well as others. The fact that not only that life in that moment, but generations to come, sacrificing so we can have freedom of speech, so that we can defend our founding principles, that we can defend Republican government, not the party, but law and order, and that we are all equal under God, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, with a coalition that was people from the United States, the United Kingdom, soldiers from Canada, France, Australia, Czechoslovakia, and Poland, the Netherlands, Norway, New Zealand, Greece, South Africa, and Southern Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, ever since 1980, when they became a free and independent nation after British colonial rule. So we remember them today as they bravely took on an evil empire and ultimately won for the good of humanity. We honor their lives today, as President Trump and Vice President Vance and Secretary Pete Hegseth so honorably did just a few days ago on Memorial Day, saluting and laying the wreath before the tomb of the unknown soldier, and then sharing that vision that really coincides with law enforcement and the amazing work that Attorney General Pam Bondi and her deputy Todd Blanche are working on a daily basis. Really, government stands as a testament to secure you. So from a federal perspective, it's our federal law enforcement officers, but also our military that swear that same oath as the President of the United States does. And we saw that at West Point, President Trump addressing the Black Knights as they became second lieutenants and officers in the United States Army. Will be celebrating the 250th birthday next week in Washington, D.C., not to be missed, next Saturday. So roughly a week from today, 8 days away from that beautiful and bold celebration, as they swore to defend America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. On the domestic front, though, especially, AG Bondi FBI Director Kash Patel, Tom Homan, the border czar, and Kristi Noem at DHS, all going on these raids with Border Patrol, with ATF, with their departments as well as the FBI to get Trende Aragua and the border cartels and MS-13 the hell out of our country, and if so, prosecuted right here in the United States with the death penalty fully on the table. Because what some of these people have done, especially under the auto pen, killing and maiming and destroying the best among us. And those stories need to be reflected upon, as dark and horrible as they are. I think about Jessalyn Nungary, whose mother was honored at the joint session of Congress 3 months ago when President Trump honored those great Americans, including DJ Daniel, the honorary Secret Service member and agent, also an honorary member of dozens of departments now across the United States, including his hometown of Houston, Texas. He's been diagnosed again with a relapse of 3 brain tumors, 13 years old, and just wants to serve his country. The Democrat Party decided to sit down and not clap for DJ. How twisted and how sick do you have to be? But Al Green from Houston decided to stand up and make a spectacle and raise his ridiculous cane and scream falsehoods at the President of the United States. It was embarrassing. It was beneath the dignity of the House of Representatives, and he was rightfully removed and censured by the United States House of Representatives. And roughly in a 280-year history or so of that body, no one has been quite censured like that individual. And in fact, very few have been censured as a result of his disgraceful actions from the floor. And that's my challenge to Democrat friends, especially those in Washington, D.C. What is your message? Do you care about the American people? Do you care about the fact that Attorney General Bondi and Deputy Blanche are fighting human trafficking, sex trafficking? Think about that. People coming over this border, these young children who can't speak the language, sold into slavery. With the promises of these border cartels, MS-13 and Trende Aragua, who claim they're bringing these kids to freedom. Imagine being that poor, crossing that border. God knows what happened to them along that trail. And the Auto Pen administration lost over 300,000 kids in that process. How disgraceful. Let me tell you, our troops 81 years ago did not storm those beaches in order for those things to happen to the most innocent and youngest among us. And it grinds my gears. It gets me fired up to think that the youngest and most innocent among us, as Secretary Kennedy said during the Auto Pen administration, HHS and even some in DHS are likely responsible for what happened when it came to human trafficking. But thank God we have people like Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche and Bobby Kennedy, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, among many others, including President Trump, who brought this government together when you re-elected him 7 months ago to the day. Good on you, America. You saw what the lawfare was all about. You saw the fake impeachments. You saw the Russia hoax. You saw 2 assassination attempts. I can remember that day, July 13th, 2024. I was watching our great coverage. I happened not to be working that night, but I was watching our colleagues and our hosts in the field. And right before I turned it off at 6:59 because I was driving to Midtown Atlanta to see one of my best friends play that night in his band. And all of a sudden, my phone literally started blowing up. The president has been shot. And I could not believe it. I mean, the hair on the back of my neck, although there's not much right now, it was just, oh my goodness. I was in tears. I was scared to death. And it's something I'm not very vulnerable on times, especially on air, but something I'll never forget. I'm sure many of you will never forget. And our commander-in-chief stood strong, and you saw his courage literally under fire in that moment of fight with the fist. And he said to Secret Service and now Director of the Secret Service, Sean Curran, wait, let me get my shoes. He just wanted to get his shoes before he went to the hospital. And I'll never forget that footage from those who are in the hospital with their loved ones or recovering from their respective surgeries, filming it saying, oh my goodness, here he is, he's okay, he's walking into the hospital. That's when someone surely shows you their character when they're under fire, literally or figuratively speaking. And in that situation, President Trump hit by a would-be assassin's bullet, but it did not deter him. The angels, God, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, with him in that moment, and with this administration, with this extraordinary cabinet, as we are honored to bring you all of this unbridled access and this breaking news of a press conference with Attorney General Pam Bondi and her deputy Todd Blanche to address the many issues they are facing on a daily basis. This is not something that's a cakewalk by any means, but President Trump has brought together subject matter experts to attack and tackle what the auto pen left for them, an absolute mess. We've never seen a worse administration over the course of 4 years when it came to opening the border on purpose, when it came to skyrocketing inflation, when it came to adding $12 trillion plus in the national debt in 4 years. And we can remember that his president, Barack Hussein Obama, when the auto pen was vice president, it was only $8 trillion over the course of 8 years, so roughly $1 trillion a year. Pebbles and peanuts compared to what Joe Biden did. And as President Barack Hussein Obama did say about Joe Biden, the auto pen, don't underestimate Joe's ability to expletive things up. So I will leave that for you, the American people, to decide how the 44th president thought about his vice president. Definitely not a relationship that was a positive one, and far from this friendship that the Bidens and the Obamas allegedly have. But I don't necessarily like to dive into people's personal feelings about one another. But you could see the animosity when President Obama would give a speech and his auto pen vice president standing right by him. What an absolute disgrace. Nothing like the team of experts we have now with President Trump and Vice President Vance in action with the most extraordinary cabinet of rivals, of people that are Republicans, Democrats, independents, and may have switched here or there, but regardless, subject matter experts at what they have to offer the American people. And we're about to see it momentarily here with Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche to cover everything that you need to know for this great country. Now, other things in the news right now, we're seeing the Trump effect, not only on the border, not only with national security and law enforcement, that big, beautiful bill, in fact, being supported by Border Patrol, Tom Homan, all those law enforcement officers, because it will put an additional 10,000 on the border to protect you, the American people. But the Trump effect has higher pay for American workers across the board. According to the GOAT of press secretaries, Caroline Leavitt, she mentioned recently that President Trump's America First economic agenda has created a booming economy. Jobs are up, unemployment is down, wages are increasing, and inflation is dead. More than 139,000 good jobs were added to the private sector in May, all accounted for by American-born workers. So Americans should continue to expect this great victory and countless expectations exceeded. Thank you to Caroline Leavitt, as we can toss now live to the president heading to Joint Base Andrews. President Trump on Marine One, about to board Air Force One. Of course, it is not Air Force One until he is on board, which is moments from now, as the Marines and Air Force responsible for protecting and carrying our President of the United States. And we are going to go back to that right now to see President Trump boarding Air Force One. And right there, just getting into the beast, that's the limo that carries President Trump. And if you've watched any specials on that, a fascinating vehicle, what it's capable of doing and protecting this great president, much needed given the threats against his life. And God is with him. God is with the Trump family. Just think about things that I faced in my own life and countless people have faced in their lives, and then this family remaining so united, so together in this mission of public service. And I've been fortunate enough to meet a number of the Trumps, not all of them now, and I can tell you they're the most gracious, wonderful, humble people. And as Bill Maher put it, of all people, as he had dinner with President Trump a few weeks back at the invitation of Bob Ritchie. You may know him better by Kid Rock. He's mutual friends with President Trump and Mr. Bill Maher, the comedian and late night host. And Bill Maher said in his monologue during his show, "Take it what you will. This is my experience with this man. He actually looks me in the eye," speaking of President Trump, "and wants to know how I feel about a situation, knowingly that I might not agree with him on something. He asked me, 'How do you feel about this?' on countless situations, sat there over dinner and listened to Bill Maher, who we know can talk a lot." And I have a lot of respect for Mr. Maher, although we probably would not agree on everything. He's a liberal, I'm a conservative, but someone who is a self-avowed atheist. I'm a Catholic Christian practicing, but I think we'd agree on certain things like radical Islamic terrorism. We'd agree on things like comedy, that we have to smile, and ultimately we'd agree on things that we have to dialogue. And that's why he went to the White House at the request and invitation of the President of the United States, that right versus left, or traditional conservative versus traditional liberal, have to dialogue. In fact, this is the coalition of that populist middle that President Trump has been able to lead in this MAGA Maha movement. And that was solidified back at that Turning Point Action endorsement of August of last year, when Secretary Kennedy, then a former presidential candidate for the Democrats turned independent, endorsed President Trump with those fireworks and that great display. And if you have not been to a Turning Point USA event, I behoove you, please feel free to go. It's not just for high school and college students, it's for adults as well, because you'll enjoy the music, the entertainment, and the love fest that it is. Almost as exciting as a Trump rally. And I speak so highly of it because I used to work over there a few years back and advocate for that free speech on the college and high school campuses. And a big shout out, congratulations to my friend Charlie Kirk on 13 years as of yesterday. Happy birthday to Turning Point USA and the amazing work they continue to help save America and to help change the hearts and minds of those young people who might have otherwise been indoctrinated by far left lunatics on our college campuses. Because being in school in a post-secondary project or institution or what have you, you should be able to dialogue. It's literally all about free speech, and liberals once championed this against the Vietnam War, dating back to Berkeley in the 1960s. The free speech movement was, in fact, the modern free speech movement was born arguably at UC Berkeley. And over the course of the last few years, you've seen people get punched in the face, receive black eyes, and those perpetrators not even prosecuted, not even arrested on campus. I saw it myself with colleagues that went through that simply for standing there on a sidewalk in a public space, speaking freely. Things like taxation is theft. Things like stop anti-Semitism. Things like hands off my Second Amendment. Things that are not necessarily that controversial. You might disagree, but honest people can dialogue. Well, unless you're at Harvard, of course, and you are berating those of Jewish origin and background. Why would you do that? I thought you were a Presbyterian institution dating back to the 16th and 17th centuries. That's clearly changed at Harvard, among other of what used to be great institutions in the United States of America. But the beautiful thing about freedom is we can choose where we put our money. We can choose where we ultimately go to school. We can choose not to attend these so-called four-year college and universities, but rather send our students and our children into apprenticeships and to the trades. And in turn, instead of underwater basket weaving and going for transgender studies and useless degrees like that, they can actually learn how to become an electrician or a plumber, or if they like to work with their hands, any other trade that can give them six figures right out of trade school. Not a bad idea, but of course, you discern that as a free people. You discern that as family members. You discern that as friends, and that's the way it should be in a constitutional republic. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and we will always defend those values. Right here at RSBN Live, your go-to live desk and network for the truth, for unbridled access to your government, for press conferences like this that are breaking late into a Friday afternoon and evening. I hope you have wonderful plans this weekend, TGIF, to enjoy with your family and friends as we reflect upon 81 years today. Our great soldiers who stormed the beaches at Normandy, Omaha, and France, along that coastline in order to save Western civilization and the world against the psychopath known as Adolf Hitler, his German army, and Mussolini in Italy, who wanted to make a neo-Roman empire that could not be further from those foundational principles of the Roman Republic and, of course, Imperial Japan. And our army went back to back, our entire military, in fact, back-to-back world champs, but not at the cost of countless thousands to millions of lives affected after something so devastating. So reflect upon that this weekend. Maybe perhaps turn on Saving Private Ryan. I don't think there's a better film that depicts what took place on those beaches. Think about this. Teenagers and those in their early 20s, many in that first wave who knew they might not come home. But they did that as their boats landed and those doors opened to a blockade of a German fascist force that they plowed through, coming with ships and soldiers and sailors nonstop in order to go up that hill and take it. And those pictures are amazing, whether they're in black and white or whether they have been fixed and enhanced to show the color of them. And you look at Operation Overlord as it was coded into D-Day by General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the U.S. Allied commander who would become the 34th president of the United States. But as he put it, and as he was buried in his military, his army garb, and his uniform, spoke out against the military-industrial complex and spoke of peace through strength, which then inspired people like Ronald Reagan, an actor, a kid from the Midwest who went out west in order to live his dream. He was a baseball announcer to begin with and went by Dutch Reagan, went by a nickname, and became governor of California, and then your 40th president of the United States. And in a very similar fashion, the great real estate mogul, the man from the business sector who dominated city skylines, not only in the United States, but across the world, dealing with corrupt city councils, especially in the Big Apple, and became an entertainer in his own right with The Apprentice. But many business people learning so much, including yours truly, as a result of watching that show, Donald John Trump, defying the odds as a private citizen to become the 45th and 47th president of the United States. And moments from now, we will hear from his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and her deputy, Todd Blanche, holding a press conference on the important things facing law enforcement today in America in 2025 from their Department of Justice, one that was rigged under Barack Hussein Obama. Eric Holder, arguably he should be in jail. Think about the last Attorney General. He almost was on the Supreme Court. Could you imagine that? How terrible that would have been. Someone who weaponized this government, someone who attempted to provoke lawfare against President Donald Trump with rogue attorneys general like Tish James up in New York and those DAs that were all meeting with the Autopen at the White House based on their White House logs. They can say as much as they want on places like The View or the legacy media that we didn't collaborate, we did not collude in order to create lawfare against then a former president to prevent him from being reelected, to attempt to take him off of several state ballots, including Colorado and Maine, where that actually went to illegal hearings. And in totality, 19 states that attempted to remove Donald Trump and usurp your constitutional privileges to vote for someone, and our favorite liberal Democrat of all time, and Senator Ted Cruz's former professor at Harvard, Alan Dershowitz, saying, this is a great scandal going against you, the American people, in order to choose who you'd like to be as your chief executive. But you, the American people, much smarter than the deep state globalists, much smarter than the League of Shadows. Alexander Hamilton famously wanted a strong centralized government. And as we read throughout the Federalist Papers, his advocacy for that central banking, but even with his vision of a strong centralized government in your federal city of Washington, D.C., we know the late, great Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton would be rolling in his grave with what the globalist and President Trump's predecessors attempted to do, lining their pockets and putting really corrupt people into place who did not stand for you. They were Republican in name only. They were Democrat in name only. I think about people like that strange individual, Jim Comey, who wanted to 86-47. You might have seen that with the seashells. He has a lot of explaining to do. And isn't it beneath the office he once held as FBI director? And as Kash Patel put it recently in an interview so eloquently, when the former director says and does things like that for a book tour in order to stir up crazy people, in order to maybe inspire other acts of violence, in order to simply make himself relevant and attempt to make more money, God knows he has enough off of the backs of the fair taxpayers of this great nation. It creates copycats. It makes the Department of Justice's job more difficult. It puts Pam Bondi and Kash Patel in a so-called chokehold, or even handcuffing them from being able to do their jobs. You'd think that those who were in those roles prior would understand that. But of course, there's Trump derangement syndrome out there. There is wild leftist thought. There are people that are upset because their honey train is done, because this administration is focused on scaling back and streamlining the size and scope of the federal government. A political mentor of mine actually once would say that about county government from my neck of the woods. I'm running for office here with my team to do just that. Now, President Trump doing that in D.C. Let's toss it now live to Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy Todd Blanche.